Well, good morning, everybody. Jeff Slakey here on Daybreak. I have a great guest in studio to talk a little bit about the business of Thurston County. It's Thurston County Commissioner Gary Edwards. Good morning, Gary.
Good morning, Jeff.
Thanks for coming on the air with me.
I'm glad to be here.
Nice to talk with you. We talk monthly or so with your counterpart there on the commission, Bud Blake, a great guy to talk with. And
Yep.
Always fun stories.
Enjoy working with Bud.
He's a good guy. Tell me a little bit about yourself. You're coming up on your year anniversary as a Thurston County Commissioner. Has been any kind of eye-opening moments for you as you sit behind the gavel there?
Well, I spent quite a few years as a lawman.
Yeah.
And then the last 20 as the elected sheriff of that career in Thurston County. And I thought I knew something about how county government ran.
Yeah.
And you talk about, is there anything unexpected? Well, probably more unexpected than not when it comes right down to it. And I really found out how much maybe I did not know. And it gives you a little more respect for those that have held the position prior to you.
Right.
Where you might have been critical about, well, what'd you do that for? Well, you see that it connects with this or that, and maybe that's why they did something. Although maybe you don't agree with their priorities, but those are things you work around within the system. So a lot of things that I probably was not quite as aware of that I should have been aware of. But maybe that's typical.
One of the things, the initial conversations and thoughts to bring you on was that you were Thurston County Sheriff, and we talk often about the Mason County budget and public safety and law enforcement there. And so I wanted to ask you about going from the Thurston County Sheriff and you working on your budget for the sheriff's office to now being a county commissioner where you oversee all budgets, including the sheriff's budget. Were you, like you mentioned, able to see it, obviously now from the other side of the story?
Well, that's probably right. That is one thing I did have a pretty good understanding of, is the law and justice budget in total, because that's a big hit on the current expense budget. It's 70% or so, I think that's pretty common in most county jurisdictions. The sheriff's budget itself, I think, is about 37%. I don't know of that portion of the current expense budget. So more than half of the law and justice budget goes to the sheriff.
Right.
So you're right. That was a different take on it, if you will, because you have dedicated funding that can only be utilized for certain things. So yeah, it was a bit of an eye-opener. Even though I understood it, there are so many issues that overlap. So if you do this, you're eligible for funding from this source, but if you don't do that, then maybe you're limited on what you can do. So you have to balance all that out. But basically, to me, it's all about setting priorities. What is the priority for the community? Obviously, I'm biased towards law and justice because I think we want a safe community. Now, on the other hand, we have to allot money for the parks because it isn't all about law and justice. Everybody's not bad or being bothered by a criminal, and they want things to do. Yeah. So you want to make sure your park is cleaned up. And then it comes down to revenue. And I'll just give an example. On our park system, for an example, we've got 6 full-time employees that work in Thurston County, cover all the parks. Well, I think Olympia has about, it's over 60 full-time employees. Lacey's got maybe 38 or something, or 42, and Tumwater's got 31 or whatever it is. But the ratio is so out of whack. Well, that same thing applies towards law and justice.
Okay.
If you think about the number of officers, the law enforcement portion of the sheriff's office, how many officers they have to serve the numbers of citizens in Thurston County, the thousands. And there is actually a ratio of officers per 1,000. We've got the lowest ratio of officers per 1,000 citizens of any county in the state of Washington.
Wow.
And I think our ratio is down around 0.6, not 6 officers per 1,000, but almost a half of an officer per 1,000.
Jeez.
And some of your municipalities, as a general rule, they've got closer to 2 officers per 1,000. So 4 times as many, 3 times as many.
All of you on the commission have history in law enforcement, isn't that right?
Well,
or military.
Yeah, Hutch has a long distinguished career. I've got about 39 years, I guess, and Bud has over 25, I think, as a military officer. So, yeah, we've got probably a prejudice towards recognizing the need for at least first responders, for sure.
The other thing I think unique about this current makeup of Thurston County Commission, all independents, is that right? You're
Yes.
all registered as independents and all male on the council.
Yep,
Is that
and
correct?
and that's a change from earlier, prior to Bud getting elected.
Yeah.
It was all females and all Democrats.
Yeah.
Now, I ran as a Republican for those 5 terms as sheriff in Thurston County. So, but during that period of time, every year I approached the legislature and tried to get them to create a nonpartisan position for the elected sheriff. Well, for one reason or another, it was never successful. I don't know, maybe I wasn't a good enough driver of that particular agenda, but it just never went over very well with the legislation.
That is an interesting thing you have.
They wanted to keep it a partisan position. I think it had to do with coattails, because the position of sheriff is pretty well recognized in a community.
Yeah.
You can ask, who's your representative for District 21, or even maybe your county commissioner or assessor, whatever it might be. Not to downplay those positions, because those are all very important. But generally, the citizens know who the sheriff is. If you stand out in front of a grocery store and ask just randomly 100 people coming out, probably 80 of them are going to know who the sheriff is.
Yeah.
And probably 70 of them are going to know who the prosecutor is. But, who's your elected representative in the legislature, or the clerk, or, some of the other different positions that are very important, it's probably down there around 20%.
Yeah.
And I think that those in the legislative arena like to capitalize on, hey, that fellow's a Republican, we want to run with him, tied to him. Yeah, that kind of thing. Or a Democrat.
Yeah.
Which I wasn't a very good Republican, so the Republicans were pretty much mad at me all the time. And I wasn't a very good Democrat when it came down to it, because I was probably too conservative. And I don't know. So I really felt it should be nonpartisan. I was never successful. When it came time when I finally decided that I was going to run for this county commission position, it being a partisan position, I wanted to run as a nonpartisan. But they've got that blocked out too.
Oh, wow.
Nonpartisans are only for certain positions, city councils, judges. They're designated by the legislature.
Huh.
So I ran as a non-affiliate, I think is the way they put mine on there. I think Bud ran as an independent, maybe Hutch did too.
Yeah.
But something other than a partisan position.
Sure.
And I'm not very thrilled with partisan politics. I don't think it's sold well in general. I mean, if you look at Congress, they're not the most effective body in the country.
I think you can find many folks who agree with that statement. One of the things when Commissioner Blake is on, we talk about the Thurston and Mason kind of collaborations with the behavioral health, the BOO there, as we talk about it. One of the boards that you represent as a county commissioner is on the Area Agency on Aging. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, how can I say I represent those folks probably better than most, because I represent that demographic. I'm 70 now, so I'm getting up there. So you know that my heart is with those folks, and I just think it's a step in the right direction anytime government can kind of be looking out for our more vulnerable citizens. That could be kids, seniors, challenged. You know, there's a lot of areas that could fall under, but the Area Agency Council does represent Thurston County, the whole area here, Lewis County, and I just think that it's money well spent to invest in our seniors. Now, granted, I mentioned other vulnerable populations, but for our seniors, they've already contributed. They've ran the country. They've paid the taxes. They've paid their dues. And I just think it's very important that we serve them in their final years so that they can live with dignity.
Where would you like to see Thurston County by the end of your first term? You're up for re-election through 2020.
I generally don't even talk about that. No, this whole gig was not part of my retirement plan. Yeah. I came in specifically to deal with some issues. If I get all those issues fixed, maybe they're, you don't want to say never,
right?
But it wasn't part of the plan. I would like to get things accomplished. I'd like to reprioritize spending in government in total, and if I get that accomplished, then I will have felt like I've had success.
Okay, so spending in government, what are some other things that brought you into the race?
Well, what I felt was inappropriate spending in government brought me into the race. We had a jail that was built and sat empty for over 5 years. And that was about a $60 million investment when you think of in total, the debt servicing and bonding and everything that went into that was a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And I didn't feel they had a plan. And I don't want to talk negative about past commissioners because now I probably even have more respect for them than I did, but it's a tough position. It was just that their priorities weren't in sync with what I felt the community wanted. The community certainly didn't want that jail to be built and then sit empty. In fact, they had voted against building a jail 2 different times. But the commissioners felt that it was necessary to move forward with that. Well, I was the outgoing sheriff when they started on that, and I told them that they didn't have a plan. It didn't make sense to move forward with what they were doing. And when I talk about a plan, we've got a courthouse over there that's, over 50 years old, and really in dire straits. We need to address that courthouse position. Well, a standalone jail doesn't help our whole operation as far as efficiencies. Because yes, we could utilize electronic arraignments and such, hearings and that type of thing. But still, there's a lot of personal activity that needs to be dealt with in the court involving those citizens that find themselves in jail. Well, that means transportation. With the old jail, we just took them up to the elevator and up to the courtroom out of the facility. We did not expose the public to that threat. It just was all in-house. What people don't understand is we deal with all the Ted Bundys of the world at the county jail. Mm-hmm. Prior to their case being adjudicated, they live with us.
Yeah.
Then they go off to prison for life or whatever. So we have to always have that maximum security portion of the county jail. Well, when you start loading people in vans and moving them around, and you think of a jail population of around 500 people, that's a lot of commotion going on.
Yeah.
And so when you have a standalone facility, it just isn't feasible. Standalone facilities are good for prisons where you don't have court appearances going on, and you want to be isolated from the community section. Well, obviously, they didn't take my recommendation. They went a different direction. Again, for whatever reason, I'm not sure why everything wasn't thought out ahead of time. I know I'd been in the middle of litigation with, like the ACLU and things like that are looking out for the underdog, so to speak. And rightfully so. We don't want 50 people sleeping on the floor.
Right.
That's not fair to anybody. We want to have humane incarceration. And that was always the argument. So I understand the pressure they were up against, but I don't understand the planning that went into it. And it was built outside of the city of Olympia, in Tumwater. Well, state law requires certain offices of county government to be in the city of Olympia. So that limited our abilities, what we could do. So we have to figure out a plan. We've inherited something, the 3 commissioners there now, that we feel we need to address, but it's almost kind of like what's going on with North Korea. There's probably not a good solution. There's solutions, but not a good solution.
Yeah.
So what is the least damaging solution to the taxpayer's wallet is what we need to figure out now, because we're stuck. So is a remodel the best one? Location of a different site? So that comes to priorities and spending. So those are those 2 issues that I mentioned that are so important, is trying to get things lined out. And I do think because of personal agendas, we ended up in a situation that our economic engine wasn't running properly. We had businesses leaving Thurston County. Actually, I can't think of the name of it now, but one came over here to Shelton that was a pretty good business. And we have others that didn't locate, and it had to do with kind of a radical approach to protecting the environment, if you will. That brings us to the pocket gopher problem
the pocket
that we're dealing
gophers.
with. And I don't know anybody that doesn't want to have a pristine environment. They want clean water, clean air, managed growth. Nobody wants their house sitting on their nice manicured property that they take pride in alongside of a broken down situation with a blue tarp with the septic pipe running out that kind of contaminates your property.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that situation. So we need to have planned growth, planned development. Facilities need to be planned out, and they need to fit, and we need to keep the costs down in the process. People are tired of paying more and more taxes. It seems like the push is always give us more money, not us as elected officials finding efficiencies to serve the public better.
Sure. Well, a tough couple decisions that you'll have to make in the upcoming years. Let's continue these conversations, Gary. It's really nice meeting you and talking with you now here today. And so Thurston County Commissioner Gary Edwards on the air today. Thanks for coming on.
You're welcome.